Hey there, it's Trace. I'm going to show you do-while loops in Java today. For a do-while loop, we're going to type do, and then we're going to have a set of curly braces, an opening and closing curly brace, and that's where our code is going to go that's going to run basically inside the loop. After this closing curly brace, we're going to type while, and then two parentheses for a conditional statement. We're going to close that off with a semicolon. Our conditional statement will go in here. For now, we're going to use the true literal, just to give us an infinite loop and show that this is working. For my code, it's going to be very simple. I'm just going to put in a simple print statement. We'll do a system out print line. We'll just say test in here. That'll work just fine for what we're doing. Now, let's get into how a do-while loop works. It's actually very similar to a while loop. If you've watched my video on while loops in Java, it's a very simple loop and it works very similarly. What it's going to do, it's going to run through the code before the loop, eventually get here, and it's going to execute the code within our loop. After that code's executed, it's going to check the conditional statement right here. If that conditional statement is true, it's going to go back to the top and execute this code again before it once again checks this conditional statement. It will keep re-executing that code and checking the statement after that code's executed until that conditional statement comes back as false. Then it will, just stop the loop and go on to whatever's after the loop that you have. The major difference that I want to point out between just a while and a do-while loop is that the while loop, it checks a conditional statement, then runs a code. Whereas with the do-while loop, it runs the code before it checks that conditional statement. That's really the only major difference between these two loops. Just like the while loop, if you watch that video, we can have an infinite loop, that's just fine. If we put true in there or something else, that would be an infinite loop. That's going to be just fine. But the interesting thing is, if you recall, the while loops, we couldn't use a false literal because it returned some sort of error from the compiler saying it was unreachable code, which makes sense. But we can use the false literal here because the code does always run once before that conditional statement is checked. So we'll see it prints out once and then, finishes the loop because the conditional statement was false. So it doesn't create unreachable code. We can do that. That being said, I can't think of a practical application for using the loop this way. It seems like if you only want to execute it once, you could just put this code in there. But maybe there's something out there I'm not thinking of. If you can think of an actual application for this, please do leave that in the comments below, because that is very interesting to think about. The only other thing I want to point out, and really there's not much to say about this, it's a very simple loop, is the same thing as a while loop. If you're using, let's say we have an integer x, and we set it to 0 there, and we use it down here, say x is less than 3. We do have to remember, again, if we don't change this within the loop, it's going to create an infinite loop. And we'll see it's printing out, thousands of times down there. So we do have to remember to increment or decrement, depending on what you're doing, that variable that you're checking in your conditional statement. You'll see it only prints out 3 times there. So that's the only other thing I want to say is if you're using variables, just make sure you're changing them within the loop so that you don't create an infinite loop, unless that is your goal. But other than that, this is about all there is to say. Very simple, easy loops, very similar to the while loop. So that's about it. I do hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you again soon.